All right, let's jump right in. The date is December 26th, 2025. It was exactly 1 year ago that a revolution completely reshaped Syria. So today, we're asking a huge question. What does the country actually look like now, 1 year on? So, how do we even begin to wrap our heads around this? It's incredibly complex. Well, let's use an analogy for this whole explainer. Think of Syria as a huge corporation that just went through a massive hostile takeover. The old CEO is gone, and the new management is desperately trying to turn the whole thing around. They're trying to rebrand the company, find new investors, and get all their rogue competing departments to finally get with the program. Okay, so first things first, the money. The new leadership has a totally new business plan. They know they can't fix the country with just handouts and aid. So they are making a fundamental pivot from relying on aid to attracting serious, long-term investment. When a company rebrands, one of the first things they do is change the logo, right? Well, Syria is doing the exact same thing, but with this money. Starting January 1st, they're rolling out a brand new currency. And this isn't just for looks. They're knocking two zeros off the end, and maybe more importantly, removing Bashar al-Assad's face from the banknotes. The goal here is to try and stabilize a completely shattered economy and signal a very clean, very final break from the past. Now let's just take a moment to absorb the sheer scale of the task ahead. The World Bank has put a price tag on what it's going to cost to rebuild Syria, and that number is a mind-boggling $216 billion. That's just to get the country back on its feet. And this chart, wow, this really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? That reconstruction cost is nearly 10 times the country's entire economic output for 2024. Traditional international aid could never, ever bridge a gap that big. It's like trying to pay for a skyscraper with the change in your pocket. It's just not going to happen. And that brings us to this really crucial quote from interim President Ahmad al-Sharaza. The new leadership is pushing a completely different message. Analysts are calling it a shift from an aid mindset to an investment mindset. They're not going around asking for donations. They're pitching Syria as a business opportunity. And you know what? It looks like people are listening. This past year has seen a flood of major deals with some big regional players. We're talking about companies from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, China, and Turkey signing billion-dollar agreements to rebuild the absolute essentials: ports, airports, the power grid. Everybody wants a piece of the new Syria. And then comes the real game changer. A massive roadblock to this whole economic plan was just bulldozed. The U.S. Congress has voted to permanently repeal the crippling Caesar Act sanctions. This is huge. It means Syria can legally export its oil for the first time in 14 years and finally reconnect to the global financial system. But, and there's always a but, right? This whole corporate restructuring is hitting some serious snags internally. Just because there's a new CEO in the corner office doesn't mean every single department is happy with the new direction. The biggest headache right now involves the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF. The government's goal is to integrate them into one unified national army. But that is not going smoothly. Deadly clashes just broke out in Aleppo. There's a ceasefire for now, but it's fragile. And with a December 31st deadline for this integration just days away, tensions are unbelievably high. And at the very same time they're trying to unify their own team, they're also fighting off, let's call them hostile saboteurs from the old regime. After a deadly ISIS ambush near Palmyra killed 2 American service members, the U.S. and its partners hit back hard. They launched Operation Hawkeye Strike, which hammered over 70 ISIS targets in central Syria. And these counteroffensives are paying off big time. Syrian special forces, working with the coalition, managed to track down and kill a very senior ISIS leader named Mohammed Shahideh. Taking out this guy, who was known as the Wali of Horan, in a raid near Damascus, that's a major security win for the new government. Okay, so you've got internal fights, and you've got these holdouts. But that's not all. Syria's corporate turnaround is also under constant pressure from some very aggressive regional players, our hostile competitors. Just this week, for example, an Israeli drone strike in Lebanon, right near the Syrian border, killed a senior commander in Iran's powerful Revolutionary Guard Corps. Israel's position was that this commander was a key player directing attacks against them from both Lebanon and Syria. And believe me, this was not an isolated incident. Israel's defense minister recently laid all his cards on the table, vowing to keep up military operations on multiple fronts, including in Syria, and flat out rejecting any withdrawal from occupied territories like Mount Hermon. But here's where it gets really fascinating. For all the tough talk happening out in the open, there's a whole other game being played behind the scenes. We're getting reports that Russia is actually mediating a security deal between Syria and Israel, and apparently with a nod of approval from the US, all in an effort to calm down the tensions on that very volatile border. So, we've talked about all this high-level stuff: money, geopolitics, military strikes. But what does any of it actually mean for the people living through it? What's the human bottom line in this whole restructured company? Well, for Syria's Christian community, this past Christmas was complicated. People were celebrating under extremely tight security. There's this genuine hope for a new beginning, but it's mixed with a very real fear, especially with the memory of that horrific, deadly church bombing back in June still so fresh. And you can't look at Syria in a vacuum, right? The Pope, in his Christmas address, drew the world's attention to the immense suffering across the region, especially the dire situation in Gaza. It's just a stark reminder of the profound instability that still surrounds Syria on all sides. And so that's where we are, 1 year later. Syria is attempting a grand reopening. New investment is flowing in, there's a new vision for the future, but the embers of old conflicts are still glowing, both inside the country and out. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Is this corporate turnaround really on a path to recovery, or are the risks just too great? I suppose that really is the $216 billion question.